My name is Lucas Bennett, and I never believed in ghosts until I moved into this house. It wasn't an extravagant place, just a modest cottage nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. When I first saw it, I was drawn to the charm of the old, weathered walls and the lush greenery surrounding the house. The perfect spot for a fresh start. The previous owner had moved out after his family had grown up and left, so the house was empty and waiting for someone new. I thought it would be the ideal place to settle in and get away from the chaos of city life. The first few weeks were peaceful. I spent most of my time settling in, painting the walls, and rearranging furniture. But soon, something strange started happening. At night, when I was alone in the house, I began hearing soft whispers. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, creaking floorboards, the wind through the old windows. But the whispers grew louder, and they weren't coming from the outside. They seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. I tried to ignore it, dismissing it as my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room reading, I heard the whispering again, but this time, it was clearer. It was as though someone was speaking directly into my ear, but when I turned around, no one was there. The whispers continued, growing more insistent, more urgent. It was like the walls were trying to communicate something to me. I began to feel a presence in the house, something that wasn't human. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to find the source of the whispers. I walked through the house, pressing my ear against the walls, trying to locate the exact spot where the sound was coming from. It led me to a small door under the staircase, a door I had never noticed before. It was old and weathered, with peeling paint and rusty hinges. The door was locked, but the whispers seemed to be coming from behind it. I didn't know what to do, but curiosity got the better of me. I found a crowbar in the garage and pried the door open. The room inside was small, barely big enough for me to stand up straight. It was dark, the only light coming from a small window high up on the wall. The air inside was thick with dust, and the floor creaked as I stepped in. But there was something else in the room, something that made my skin crawl. The walls were covered in strange markings and balls, scratches, and drawings that seemed to shift in the dim light. As I stepped deeper into the room, I could hear the whispers growing louder, more frantic. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, desperate, pleading, and terrified. I turned to leave, but as I did, I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder. My heart raced, and I spun around, but there was nothing there. The whispers turned into a single word, repeated over and over again. Leave. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I knew I had to get out of there. I bolted out of the room and slammed the door shut behind me. The whispers stopped immediately, and for a moment, I felt a strange calm. But that calm didn't last long. Over the following days, the whispers grew louder, and the house felt colder, more oppressive. I began to see things out of the corner of my eye, shadows moving in the dark, shapes in the mirror that weren't my own. It was as though the house itself was alive, watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I crept out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the hallway, I saw a figure standing in the darkness. It was tall, with long flowing hair, its face hidden in the shadows. I couldn't move, frozen in place by fear. The figure turned slowly, and for a brief moment, I saw its face. It was pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. The figure opened its mouth, and the whispers flooded my ears, louder than ever. Leave, ... or we will take you. I ran from the house that night, never looking back. I don't know what was in those walls, but I know one thing for sure. Something dark, something ancient, was calling me, and if I hadn't left when I did, I might have been the next one to disappear. So now, I live somewhere else, far away from that house. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the whispers. and I know they're not done with me. My name is Noah Parker. I've always been a bit of a skeptic, someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural. But after moving into this house, my beliefs were put to the test. It wasn't a grand house, just a modest 2-story with a quaint backyard. It had been on the market for a while, and I was able to get it for a good price. The previous owner had passed away, and the house had been empty for months. I didn't mind. I liked the idea of living in a place with a little history. Something about it felt welcoming. The first few days were calm. I unpacked, settled in, and explored the house. Everything seemed normal except for one strange thing. There was a room in the house that didn't appear on any of the floor plans. I had gone upstairs to check out the bedrooms when I noticed a small door at the end of the hallway. It was tucked away, almost hidden by the wall, and it was slightly ajar. Curious, I opened it. What I found was a small, dimly lit room. It was empty, except for an old armchair in the center, facing the wall. The room was so small that it barely seemed to fit the dimensions of the house. But what really caught my attention was the odd feeling that came over me as I stood there. A chill in the air, a sense of unease I couldn't shake. I left the room and shut the door behind me, but I couldn't get it out of my mind. There was something off about that room, something that didn't belong. Over the next few days, I kept hearing strange noises coming from that room. At night, when I was trying to sleep, I would hear faint scratching sounds, like nails dragging against the floor. I assumed it was just the house settling, but it became harder to ignore. The noises grew louder, more distinct. It almost sounded like something or someone was inside that room, trying to get out. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to investigate. I opened the door to the mysterious room, but this time, something was different. The room was no longer empty. The chair was turned around, facing me, as though it was waiting for me to sit. The air was thick, almost suffocating. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The scratching noises stopped. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then, I saw it. There was something on the wall, something I hadn't noticed before. It was a small, barely visible crack, running down the center of the wall. It seemed out of place, like the wall had been repaired and then painted over. But the crack was still there. I touched it. The moment my fingers made contact, the wall shuddered, and the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged through me as I tried to turn the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped in the room. The air grew colder, and I could hear a low, guttural whisper coming from behind the wall. Suddenly, the crack in the wall began to widen, and someone began to emerge. A pale, emaciated hand reached through the crack, followed by an arm, then a whole figure. A woman, her skin stretched tight over her bones, her eyes black and lifeless, emerged from the wall. She didn't speak, but her presence was overwhelming. I could feel her hatred, her anger radiating from her like an intense heat. I stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. She took a step toward me, her eyes locked on mine. I could hear her breathing, shallow and raspy. In that moment, I knew I had to get out. I slammed my shoulder against the door, desperately trying to break it open. After what felt like an eternity, the door finally gave way, and I ran out of the room, slamming it shut behind me. I never went back into that room. I don't know what it was, or who that woman was, but I could feel her in the house, always watching, always waiting. I tried to leave, but every time I tried to pack up, I couldn't bring myself to walk away from the house. It was as though something was keeping me there, so I stay. But I never go near that room. I don't know what lies behind the wall, but I know one thing for sure. I never want to find out. My name is Emma Carter. I had spent years renting apartments in the city, always feeling like I was just passing through, never really at home. So, when I found this old house on the outskirts of town, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to settle down. The price was right, and the house had character, an old farmhouse with a weathered facade and a large backyard. I could already picture myself gardening, reading in the sun, and finally putting down roots. The first few weeks were blissful. The quiet of the countryside was a welcome change from the constant hum of the city. I spent my days unpacking and making the house my own. But then, I found the mirror. It was an antique, standing full-length mirror, tucked away in the attic. The frame was ornate, carved with intricate designs of flowers and vines. It seemed out of place in the dusty attic, but I couldn't resist bringing it down. I cleaned it off and hung it in the hallway near the stairs. It added a touch of elegance to the house. At first, everything seemed fine. But then, I began to notice strange things in the reflection. It wasn't always noticeable, but sometimes, when I walked past the mirror, I could swear I saw someone moving in the background. A figure, just out of focus, standing there. But when I turned around, there was nothing there. It happened again and again, and each time, I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me. Then, one evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I passed the mirror and froze. The figure was there again, but this time, it was clearer. A woman, with long dark hair, standing in the hallway behind me. Her eyes were fixed on me, but her face was blank, expressionless, like a mannequin. I spun around quickly, but there was no one there. I was shaken, but I convinced myself it was just a trick of the light, a distortion in the glass. I tried to forget about it, but the next night, the figure returned. This time, the woman was standing in the mirror as I walked past. Only her reflection wasn't exactly the same as mine. She was standing at an odd angle, like she wasn't matching my movements. I looked into her eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold, pure malice. It was as if she was waiting for me, watching me, wanting something. I couldn't take it anymore. I moved the mirror out of the hallway and into the guest room, hoping that would stop whatever was happening. But the moment I turned the mirror around and set it down, I felt a chill in the room. That night, I locked the door to the guest room and went to bed, hoping to put the strange happenings behind me. But I woke up in the middle of the night, hearing soft whispers, like voices coming from the other side of the door. I opened my eyes, and there she was, the woman from the mirror, standing at the foot of my bed. Her face was now more detailed, more real, and her eyes were full of rage. She took a step toward me, and I felt a cold, suffocating presence fill the room. I screamed and ran from the room, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I tried to call a friend, but my phone wouldn't work. The signal was dead. I felt trapped, isolated, as though something had taken hold of the house. The next morning, I packed my things and left, not even stopping to look at the mirror. I haven't been back since. I don't know who or what was in that mirror, but I know it wasn't just a reflection. I don't know if it was the house or something else, but whatever it was, it followed me. So, if you ever find an old mirror, don't hang it in your home, because sometimes the reflection you see isn't just your own. My name is Kevin Thomas, and I moved into this house alone. I had been looking for a place to start over, somewhere quiet, away from the hustle and bustle of my previous life. A fresh beginning. When I found this house, nestled on the edge of town, I knew it was perfect. It had that vintage charm, with wooden floors, a grand staircase, and an old-fashioned fireplace. It was everything I needed. The first week was uneventful. I unpacked, settled in, and began adjusting to the quiet, solitude. But soon, I began to notice small things I couldn't explain. It started with the lights. Sometimes, they would flicker for no reason, only to go back to normal after a few moments. I thought it was an issue with the wiring, but when I had an electrician come in, he found nothing wrong. The lights worked fine, and the house seemed to be in perfect condition. Then came the footsteps at first. I thought it was just the house settling, the creaks of old wood moving with the change in temperature. But as time passed, the footsteps became more distinct, steady, deliberate, as though someone was walking through the house when I wasn't there. I'd hear them late at night, just as I was about to fall asleep. Heavy steps, dragging across the floor. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but I started to lock my bedroom door at night. It didn't help. One evening, after hearing the footsteps again, I decided to investigate. I walked through the house, checking every room. Everything was in place, just as I'd left it. But as I reached the basement door, I stopped. The door was slightly ajar. It had been closed when I went upstairs earlier, but now it was cracked open, just enough to allow a sliver of darkness to seep through. I stepped forward, heart racing. Something was in the basement. I descended the stairs slowly, feeling the chill in the air grow thicker as I reached the bottom. The space was small, cramped, and dimly lit. I could hear the faint sound of breathing, as though someone was just out of sight. I moved deeper into the basement, my steps echoing in the silence, and then I saw it, a figure, standing in the far corner. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but as I stepped closer, I could see it clearly. An old man, hunched over, his hands pressed against the walls, as if he was trying to hold himself up. I froze, staring at him. His face was pale, gaunt, and he had an unsettling, vacant expression. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, but I could feel his eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. I tried to speak, but my throat went dry. I turned and ran up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind me. My heart was pounding in my chest. That night, I locked every door in the house and stayed awake, listening for any sounds. The footsteps didn't come. The house was quiet, but when I woke up the next morning, I found something strange. On the kitchen table, there was a note. It was written in a shaky hand, the ink smudged as though the writer had been trembling. The note simply read, "You're not alone." I never went back into the basement. I left the house that day, and I never looked back. I don't know who or what was living there with me, but I do know one thing. The house wasn't empty. There was someone or something lurking in the shadows. If you ever move into a new place, always check the basement, because sometimes the unseen tenant never leaves. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I thought I was getting a fresh start. I bought this old house out of town, hoping for peace and quiet. The city had become too noisy, too chaotic. I longed for the solitude and charm that the countryside offered. So, when I found the house on Pine Hill Road, I knew it was perfect. It wasn't a new house by any means, more like an antique with some modern touches. It was beautiful in its own way, with a wraparound porch and ivy crawling up the walls. The inside had old hardwood floors that creaked beneath my feet, and high ceilings that made everything feel grand. I could already imagine the cozy evenings in front of the fireplace, but there was something off about it. The first few nights were fine, just the usual settling sounds. But then I began hearing noises at odd hours, scratching sounds, like something was moving inside the walls. It wasn't a mouse, I was sure of that. It sounded like something ... larger, but I dismissed it, thinking it was just an old house doing its thing. Then came the locked room. I found it on the second floor, hidden behind a bookshelf that was attached to the wall. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just an old storage room, but when I tried to open the door, I found it was locked. The key wasn't in the house, and there didn't seem to be any way to get inside. The strange thing was, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I passed that bookshelf, I felt drawn to it, like something was calling me. And every night, the scratching grew louder, more desperate. It seemed to come from behind that locked door. I couldn't understand why, but something told me that whatever was behind that door was the source of the noise. I tried everything I could think of to get inside. I called a locksmith, but he couldn't pick the lock. The door had no handle, only a keyhole. It was as if the room had been sealed off intentionally. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like the house was hiding something dangerous. Then, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I found a crowbar in the garage and pried open the door. The hinges screamed as I forced the door open, and when it finally gave way, I stepped inside. The room was empty, completely bare, except for a small, dusty chair in the corner. The air was thick with dust, and the floor creaked beneath my feet. But it wasn't the emptiness of the room that made my skin crawl. It was the overwhelming sense of being watched. As I stood there, I realized something was wrong. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, they were covered in strange symbols, scratched into the surface like someone had been trying to carve something into the very structure of the house. But the most unsettling part was the chair. It was facing the corner, as if it had been placed there for someone or something to sit in. Suddenly, the scratching noise started again, louder than ever. It was coming from behind me. I turned around, but there was nothing there. That's when I saw it. In the mirror on the wall, I saw the figure, a man sitting in the chair, his face obscured by darkness. His presence was suffocating, and I could feel my heart racing. I tried to move, but my feet were frozen to the floor. The man in the mirror slowly turned his head, and in a voice that was not his own, he whispered, "You shouldn't have opened the door." I screamed and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. The mirror fell to the floor with a crash, but when I looked back, the man was gone. I left the house that night and haven't been back since. I don't know what was behind that door, but I know it wasn't just the house. Whatever it was waiting for me to open that door. And now, it's out there, somewhere, watching. If you ever find yourself in a house with a locked room, don't open it. Some things are meant to stay hidden. I'm Michael Davis, and I moved into this house a month ago. It wasn't my first choice, but it was a deal I couldn't pass up. It's a beautiful old house on the outskirts of town, with tall windows and a grand staircase that makes you feel like you're walking into another era. The price was too good to be true, but I told myself it was just because it had been sitting empty for so long. Who wouldn't want to get rid of a house like this? I'm not the superstitious type. I don't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything of the sort. I'm a man of science, after all. But the longer I stay here, the more I can't ignore the strange things happening. It started with the mirrors. At first it was just a strange feeling whenever I passed one. A slight chill, a sense that something was off. But I brushed it off. Old houses have drafts, after all. But then I noticed something more disturbing. I'd catch glimpses of something in the mirrors that wasn't there when I looked directly at them. A shadow in the corner, a figure standing just behind me, barely visible in the reflection. I'd turn around quickly, but the room would always be empty. I thought I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me, but the reflections started getting more vivid. One evening, as I was getting ready to go to bed, I saw the figure again. This time it was clearer. Man, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, standing just behind me in the mirror. I froze. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, staring at me with hollow eyes. I turned around. No one was there. Panic set in, but I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. But the next day, I saw him again, this time in the hallway mirror, and the day after that, he appeared in the reflection of the glass door. I began to notice patterns. The figure would only appear when I was alone, always in a different mirror. The more I tried to avoid them, the more persistent they became. At night, I could hear faint footsteps echoing through the house, but whenever I checked, the mirrors were always cold and still. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I was at my breaking point. I grabbed a hammer from the garage and began smashing every mirror in the house. One by one, desperate to rid myself of whatever was haunting me. But when I reached the last mirror, the one in the living room, I hesitated. As I raised the hammer, I saw him again. This time, he wasn't just in the reflection, he was standing right in front of me, staring into my eyes. His face was pale, his features distorted, as if he was rotting away in front of me. His mouth opened, and for the first time, he spoke. "You can't escape," he whispered, his voice a cold, rasping sound that sent a wave of terror through me. I dropped the hammer and backed away, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the reflection. The man in the mirror smiled, and then slowly, his face twisted into something grotesque, his eyes hollowing out as if he was being consumed by the darkness. I ran out of the house that night, leaving everything behind. I don't know who or what that figure was, but I've never returned to that house. I don't know if it's the house that's cursed, or if something followed me, but I'm not taking any chances. If you ever hear about a house on the outskirts of town, an old, crumbling mansion with mirrors that seem to look back at you, don't go. Trust me, you don't want to meet the man in the reflection. I'm Emily Carter, and I should have known better than to trust the real estate agent. The house on Crestwood Avenue looked perfect on the outside, well-kept, charming, and with more space than I ever thought I'd need. The price was right, and the neighborhood was quiet. It seemed like the ideal place for a fresh start, but from the moment I moved in, things felt wrong. At first, it was small things. The creaking of the floorboards when no one was walking on them, the soft rustling sounds I couldn't explain. I chalked it up to the house being old, figuring the sounds were just part of its character. But then it started getting worse. The first night I spent there, I heard whispers. I thought I was dreaming, but the next night, they came again, faint, almost unintelligible voices, murmuring from inside the walls. I tried to ignore it, but the voices grew louder, clearer. They were always just out of reach, like someone was speaking through a thick wall, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. I told myself it was nothing, just the house settling, or maybe the pipes. But then I started noticing something more unsettling. Every night, the whispers seemed to come from different parts of the house. One night, they'd be in the kitchen. The next, they'd be in the living room, or even in the walls of my bedroom. And always, they were just loud enough to make me uneasy, but never clear enough to make sense of. I called a contractor to check for any issues with the house. Might be old pipes or a draft, he said, dismissing my concerns with a shrug. But when he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The house was too quiet, too still. I didn't want to admit it, but I was starting to feel like I wasn't alone. One evening I decided to confront the voices. I grabbed a flashlight and started walking through the house, trying to follow the sound. The whispers led me upstairs, down the narrow hallway, and to a small door at the end. I had never noticed it before. It was tucked away, almost hidden behind an old bookshelf. The door was old, covered in dust, and had a strange, almost ominous feel to it. I hesitated. The whispers were louder now, almost frantic, urging me to open the door. My heart raced as I reached for the handle. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. The room was small, empty, except for a few old crates and boxers. But as I shined my flashlight around, I noticed something strange. One of the walls seemed newer than the rest. It was smoother, more polished. I walked over to it, running my fingers along the surface. That's when I found the small, hidden door embedded in the wall. The whispers grew louder now, almost deafening, as if the voices were right beside me. I didn't know what I expected, but I felt a sudden compulsion to open it. With shaking hands, I twisted the knob. The door swung open, and a rush of cold air hit me, along with a smell I couldn't place, damp, musty, like something had been locked away for years. Inside, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the center of the room, was a wooden chest, covered in layers of dust and cobwebs. But it wasn't the chest that terrified me, was the sight of something moving inside it. Something ... alive. Before I could react, the whispers stopped. The silence was unbearable. I could feel something watching me, but when I looked back at the chest, it was empty. I ran from the room, slamming the door shut behind me. But even now, I can hear the whispers sometimes, faint and distant, like they're waiting for me to come back, to open that door again. But I won't. Not ever again. My name is Jack Donovan, and I've always been someone who likes to understand things. I'm a man of logic, a problem solver, and I've never been one to shy away from a challenge. So when I bought the old house on Willow Lane, I figured I'd be able to fix it up without issue. It was big, old, and full of character, just what I was looking for. The house had been vacant for years, but the price was right, and I was determined to make it my own. The previous owner had left it in disarray, but it had potential. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. It wasn't long after I moved in that I noticed something odd. The house seemed to have a room that didn't exist. Or rather, a room that was never meant to be opened. I first discovered it while exploring the basement. Behind an old wooden shelf, there was a door I hadn't seen before. It was locked, but the lock was old and rusted, as though it hadn't been touched in years. I found the key a few days later, buried in a drawer of the kitchen. It seemed too convenient, too easy. But curiosity got the better of me, and I knew I had to open it. The door creaked as I turned the key and pushed it open. The room inside was small, almost claustrophobic. It was bare, except for a single chair in the middle of the floor and a small table against the wall. There was no light, but the air felt thick, like it had been sealed off from the rest of the house for a long time. A chill ran down my spine, but I couldn't help myself. I stepped inside. That's when I saw it. Scrawled on the walls, in what looked like dried blood, were words. Leave, before it sees you. I backed out of the room quickly, heart pounding, and slammed the door shut. I didn't know what to think. Was it just some sick joke? Someone's idea of a prank? But deep down, I knew it. WASN, single quotes T. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I would hear footsteps behind me when no one was there, or catch glimpses of shadows moving out of the corner of my eye. I thought I was just imagining things, but the feeling persisted. One night, I couldn't take it any longer. I had to know. What was in that room? I waited until the dead of night, when everything was quiet. The key felt cold in my hand as I approached the locked door again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I turned the key, and the door opened with a sickening creak. The room was exactly as I remembered it, but something was different now. The chair was overturned, the table moved slightly, and on the walls, more words had appeared. Too late. It knows you're here. My stomach churned. I knew I shouldn't go in, but the door was open, and the pull of whatever was inside was too strong. I stepped in once more, and that's when I saw it. The room wasn't empty. There was something in the chair. It was a man, or at least, it looked like one. His face was obscured by long, black hair, but I could feel his eyes on me, piercing through the darkness. His hands were resting on his lap, fingers twitching, as if waiting for something, or someone. I took a step back, but before I could move, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in the room. Leave, before it sees you, the voice said, but it wasn't from the man in the chair. It was coming from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It echoed in my mind. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder, the darkness heavier. I could feel it closing in on me. That's when I realized there was no escape. The house had claimed me, and it was never going to let me go. My name is Ethan Parker, and I should have known better. When my wife, Clara, and I bought the house on the outskirts of town, we thought it would be the perfect place to start our new life. It was quiet, secluded, and surrounded by trees, what we both wanted after years of city noise. But something felt off from the very first night. I remember unpacking boxes, the smell of fresh paint still lingering in the air. Clara was setting up the living room, and I was trying to figure out where to put our bookshelves. That's when I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible whispering coming from the walls. I thought it was just the house settling, a normal sound for any old building. But as the days went on, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. I tried to ignore it, but it became impossible. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the whispers echoing in my ears. They weren't in any language I could understand, just a series of low, guttural sounds that seemed to crawl under my skin. Clara didn't hear them. She said I was just tired from the move, that I needed to relax. But the whispers didn't stop. In fact, they seemed to follow me. The more I tried to shut them out, the more persistent they became. Then, one night, as I was lying awake, I felt a cold draft brush against my neck. I turned, expecting to see Clara asleep beside me, but the bed was empty. I didn't hear her footsteps, so I got up to check the rest of the house. When I reached the hallway, the air grew thick, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening, coming from behind the walls. I traced them to the old wooden door at the end of the hall. It led to the basement, a place we hadn't dared explore yet. With my heart racing, I opened the door. The basement was dark, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow everything. But there was something else down there, something I could feel, but couldn't see. A presence, lurking, waiting. I heard Clara's voice then, faint, calling my name from the bottom of the stairs. Ethan, come down here. I froze, unsure of whether it was her or something else. Her voice didn't sound right. It was distorted, unnatural. I stood there, torn between the urge to run and the need to make sure she was okay. The whispers grew louder, now almost like a chant. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted down the stairs, only to find nothing. The basement was empty. But then, as I turned to leave, I saw it scratched into the wall, just above the stairs. Welcome home, Ethan. I ran back upstairs, my breath shallow, panic setting in. Clara was in the living room, looking at me like nothing had happened. She hadn't moved from the spot she was in when I left. Her expression was calm, but I could see the faintest trace of something wrong in her eyes. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know what I saw or heard, but the whispers have never stopped. They're still here, following me, waiting for the day when they'll finally get me. I should have known better. Now, I can't leave. The house is my home, and it knows my name. My name is Sarah Lark, and I never believed in ghosts until I moved into this house. It was supposed to be a fresh start for me and my husband, David. We had spent years in an apartment, but we wanted more space, somewhere to grow old together. When we found the old Victorian house at the end of Elm Street, it seemed perfect. It had character, history, and a price we could afford. The owner, an elderly woman, had insisted it had been passed down through generations, and when we asked about its history, she just smiled and said, "Nothing too strange, dear." From the moment we moved in, though, things felt off. It wasn't anything I could point to specifically, but it was there. A chill in the air, the way the shadows seemed to move just a bit too quickly. The doors that would creak open on their own. David brushed it off, claiming it was just the house settling, but I wasn't so sure. One evening, after dinner, I was in the kitchen cleaning up when I heard the floorboards upstairs creak. I thought nothing of it, probably David, moving around, but then I heard it again. This time, it sounded like footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, like someone was walking across the hallway upstairs. I called up to David. "Hey, what are you doing up there?" There was no answer. I assumed he hadn't heard me, so I went upstairs to check on him. The house was eerily quiet, and when I reached the top of the stairs, I noticed something strange. The door to the guest bedroom was slightly ajar, even though we hadn't been in there since we moved in. Curious, I pushed it open. The room was empty, save for a small desk in the corner, but something was off, something wasn't right. The air was thick, heavy, as though something had been there recently. And then, I saw it, a small, tarnished key, lying on the desk. It didn't belong to anything we owned. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand, feeling a strange pull towards it. My heart began to race as I noticed something else, a faded, handwritten note taped to the underside of the desk drawer. The writing was old, faded, and shaky, but I could make it out. "He's still here. Don't open the door." I didn't know what to think. I had never seen this note before. I hurriedly shoved the key into my pocket and went downstairs to confront David. But when I got to the living room, David wasn't there. The house was silent again, but now, the silence felt oppressive, like something was waiting. That night, the footsteps continued. They were louder now, and closer. I lay in bed, my heart thudding in my chest, unable to sleep. The noise seemed to move through the house, stopping just outside our bedroom door. It felt like someone or something was standing just on the other side, waiting. I didn't dare open the door. When morning came, David was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway, and the house was strangely empty. I called him, but he didn't pick up. Hours passed, and I started to panic. Where could he have gone? Finally, I decided to check the guest bedroom again. When I opened the door, I froze. The room was different. The desk, the key, the note, they were all gone. In their place was a single photograph of David and me, taken on our first day at the house. But there was something wrong with the photo. David's face was blurred, like it had been erased. I don't know where David is now. The only thing I know for sure is that someone, is still here. It's watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I don't know how long I'll last in this house, but I do know one thing. I won't be the last to live here. My name is Malcolm Cruz, and I have spent my entire adult life in the Ashford cinema. It wasn't a glamorous place, more like a forgotten relic. The carpet had stains no one talked about. The walls were peeling in places where the dim light couldn't reach, and the air always smelled faintly of old popcorn and something metallic. But Ashford had history, the kind of history that couldn't be found in any book or on any website. People talked about the theater like it was alive, like it had a soul. Old rumors about things that happened after hours, lost souls who never left. And its final screening, its last showing, was a legendary event that no one dared to speak about. I was hired as the projectionist. It wasn't exactly a dream job, but it paid the bills. The theater had one projector for all 4 screens, so things were always a bit chaotic. We had a standard lineup: romantic comedies, thrillers, a few classic horror films, but after hours, when the late night shifts rolled in, it was different. That's when the real films started. The first one was a weird little black and white short. No title, just an old reel found in the basement. The film was grainy and shaky, the kind of thing that made your eyes ache. But as I set the film into the projector and watched the screen flicker to life, I knew this wasn't just an old film, it was alive. The footage was silent at first, but slowly, eerie, distorted whispers started filling the air. It was a woman's voice, but she was speaking in a language I didn't recognize. The camera moved through what looked like a hallway, a dark, narrow corridor. It was dimly lit, and the shadows seemed to twitch, as if something was hiding just out of sight. I wanted to stop it, but I couldn't. The camera entered a room at the end of the hall, and in the center of that room a mirror, But not just any mirror. It was an old, tarnished piece of glass. The woman in the film walked toward it, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the surface. And that's when it happened. She looked directly at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Her eyes, those hollow, dark eyes, felt like they were piercing through me. She whispered something I couldn't understand, but it felt like a command, a warning. And then the screen glitched. Everything went white. When the light flickered back, I was no longer in the projection booth. I was standing in that dark hallway from the film. Panic surged through me. The room felt cold, too cold. I turned around, only to find the hallway stretching infinitely. The shadows that had once seemed distant now moved closer and closer. I tried to run, but the floor seemed to shift beneath me, like I was sinking into it. I heard the whispers again, but this time, they were clear, and they were coming from behind me. Turn around. Against my better judgment, I turned. The woman from the film stood in front of me, only this time, she wasn't in the frame anymore. She was real. She was here, her face twisted in a grotesque grin, her eyes black voids that seemed to suck in all the light. "Why did you watch?" she hissed. "Why did you open it?" Suddenly, the walls of the hallway closed in on me. I was trapped, unable to move. The whispering became deafening, each voice calling my name in a way that sent shivers down my spine. "Leave now, or you'll never leave." I felt my body being pulled toward the mirror at the end of the hall. The closer I got, the more the world around me seemed to vanish. It was as if I was being swallowed by the reflection. I reached out, fingers grazing the surface. Everything went black. I woke up in the projection booth back where I started, but everything felt different. The air was heavier. The screen was blank. There was no sound. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. I turned back to the screen. It flickered to life again, but this time, the film was showing my own face screaming, twisted in terror. And then, the words flashed across the screen. "The last showing begins, and never ends." That was the night I realized Ashford Cinema wasn't just haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by its own films. Films that didn't end when the reel ran out. They kept playing, looping in some twisted, eternal cycle. Every time I show a film now, I can feel it. The weight of the eyes on me, the whispers that never stop. The last showing is still running, and it's not the audience that's trapped. My name is Linnea Frost. I used to love films. That kind of love where you quote them in casual conversation, where you cry at the same scene every rewatch. That kind of love that eventually drives you to work in a place like Pennyvale Pictures, a nearly abandoned old cinema on the edge of town. It was the only job I could land after college, and from the outside, it had charm brick walls, a classic marquee, the smell of buttered popcorn, but inside, it felt ... hollow, like the soul of the building had rotted quietly over time, leaving only shadows and reels that never quite sat still. My second weekend, the projectionist Russell, a pale, jittery guy, pulled me aside. "There's a storage room behind Theater 6, he said. "Don't go in there. Not unless you want your head messed up." I laughed it off, until the night I had to close alone. Theater 6 had been empty all day, no screenings scheduled, but as I walked past it, I saw the projector light on, flickering through the window. The screen glowed dimly behind the curtains. The door wasn't even locked. Inside, the air was cold. The reel was running, though no one had loaded it. I stepped into the booth. The film wasn't labeled, just black tape across the canister. Curiosity. Common sense. I watched, and I saw myself, not a scene from my life, but something that felt pulled from my mind. Me, age 10, at my parents' divorce hearing. The sound was warped, voices echoing like screams underwater. I tried to shut it off. The projector wouldn't stop. The reel shifted. Now I was 12, watching my dog die in my arms. I had never told anyone what that looked like. Never shared the exact way his eyes rolled back, or the whimper that broke me, and then I heard a whisper. Not from the speakers, from the room. "You left us here." I turned. Rows of seats filled with versions of me, each from a different year, different trauma. Some were crying, others just stared blankly. "You recorded us," one of them hissed, "and then you forgot." I ran, but the theater stretched, the aisle infinite, screen behind me growing louder, playing more scenes. My first heartbreak, my worst mistake, my friend's overdose. All my real bite by the time I escaped. The door behind me slammed shut. The screen went dark. I told Russell everything. He just nodded. "It's the theater," he said. "It records what hurts, shows it back when you're weak." I quit the next day, moved out of town. Haven't watched a movie since. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the whir of a reel behind my bedroom wall. And once I swear I woke up with a film canister beside my bed. My name scratched into the metal, and beneath it, a sticky note. "Next showing, when you forget again." My name is Dorian Skell, and when I was 17, I worked part-time at Harlan Cinema, the kind of place that smelled like old cola and mildew. Most shifts were harmless, checking tickets, cleaning popcorn, until I discovered the room behind. Screen 3. It started when I found a ticket stub in the lobby. Not strange except it had no time, no movie title, just 2 words: Playroom Access. I asked the manager, Old Man Withers, about it. He got real quiet, then simply said, "Don't go poking around screen 3. It's archived." Archived. What the hell did that mean? Of course, I poked. Late one night, after the last show ended, I used the skeleton key and unlocked the hallway behind screen 3. It was narrow, dusty. A dead bulb above buzzed dimly. At the end, an old red curtain. Behind it, a door marked Children's Playroom. I stepped in. It looked like a daycare from a different century. Peeling circus wallpaper, toy chests, cribs with bite marks. The light inside buzzed erratically. In the far corner, a dusty rocking horse, rocking on its own. I turned to leave. Door gone. I reached for my walkie. Static then. Laughter high-pitched, giddy. Wrong. From behind the rocking horse, a child crawled out, but not a normal child. Its eyes were too wide. Its mouth hung open, too many teeth, like piano keys. It pointed at me and said, "You're late." Suddenly, the toys began moving. Dolls turned their heads. Jack-and-O boxers cranked themselves. A puppet on the shelf whispered, "Stay and play, Dorian." How did it know my name? I backed toward the curtain, heart slamming. The child lunged on all fours like a spider. I threw a toy chest in its path and burst through the curtain. I stumbled into the theater, empty seats, the projector off. Everything was back to normal, almost. Except no one remembered me entering screen 3. Except I aged 3 years overnight. And now, every time I pass that hallway, I hear it. That soft whisper. Late again. I quit. Burned the uniform. But I still dream of the playroom. Sometimes, I wake up with popcorn in my pockets. Sometimes, I hear the toys laughing in my closet. And once, just one sigh, woke up with a child's ticket stub in my hand. It read, "Playroom Access. Admit 1." My name is Colton Wren, and I was the sound technician for the overnight movie marathons at Echo Reel Cinemas. It was mostly dull, adjust volume levels, cue surround effects, monitor the board, easy money. Until that night we were screening a 1960s psychological horror, The Mirror Room. Obscure, grainy, barely audible. I sat in the sound booth, sipping my 3rd coffee, when I heard Ita voice. Not part of the movie. Whispery. Female. Close. "Can you hear me?" I froze. Rewound the reel. Played it again. Nothing. Then, after a long silent frame, There it was again. Please, don't rewind me. The booth went cold. I checked all mic inputs, all off. No live feed. No way that voice could have entered the track. I paused the film, looked at the audio waveform, a sharp spike just where the whisper had been. I zoomed in. It looked like a heartbeat. Suddenly the reel jumped. The movie skipped forward, fast, scenes blurring, music backwards. I slammed stop, and then silence, except for the speaker. He's listening now. The screen in the booth lit up, with my face live feed, even though the projector wasn't recording. Behind me, on the monitor, a figure, long arms, no face, crawling down the wall like it was liquid. I spun. Nothing. But I wasn't in the booth anymore. I was on screen, trapped inside the grainy footage of the mirror room, my face flickering, my voice looping endlessly. Can you hear me? Now they screen that film every Halloween. People swear there's a whisper halfway through the second act. Some say it's static. Some say it's me, still asking for anyone to hear me. My name is Elric Dane, and I worked night shifts at Celestial Moon Cinemas, the kind of rundown theater where popcorn smells like wet cardboard and no one checks the bathrooms after 11. My job was simple: take tickets, clean up puke, survive. Until morning, one night. We had a single late screening in Theater 6. The movie was some budget horror flick no one cared about. The box office was dead. Not a soul in line. And yet, a man handed me a torn ticket. No barcode, no date, no theater number, just a seat. Row D, seat 9. He didn't say a word, just smiled and walked in. I checked the system: no sale, no comped tickets. No one was supposed to be there, so I followed him inside. Theater 6 was pitch black. No trailers, no ads. Just a countdown starting from 100, ticking down with every breath. I scanned the rows, empty, except for D9. He was sitting there, staring at the blank screen. But something was wrong. His body wasn't still. It shimmered, like static on old VHS tapes. I stepped closer. My radio hissed, "Do not speak to him." I jumped, thought it was a prank, reached for my flashlight. It sparked, and died. The man turned his head, not fully, just enough to reveal a lack of a face. No eyes, no nose, just a torn mouth that pulsed like it was breathing. Then, one by one, people began appearing in the seats around him. Old, pale, rotten clothes, silent, a full theater of them. I backed up, heart punching my ribs. The screen flashed white. A list of names rolled down, no credits. Just names. My name was at the bottom. Then everything shut off. Power, lights, my mind. When I came to, it was 4:06 a.m. I was outside Theater 6, locked, sealed from the inside. We never reopened that room, but sometimes, even now, I hear footsteps behind me as I mop the sticky lobby floors, and a low voice whisper, "Row D is waiting." My name is Mavis Haller, and I was a janitor at the Rosevale Grand Theater, an aging cinema clinging to life with faded carpets and flickering bulbs. Everyone avoided the downstairs restroom. Even managers told us, just clean the upper level. But on Halloween night, the top floors were closed for renovation. And guess who got stuck cleaning the forbidden basement bathroom? Yup, lucky me. It smelled like mold and old urine. One long hallway, 2 stalls, one flickering light. As I scrubbed the sink, I heard a stall door creak open. I froze. I was alone. I walked toward the stalls. One was shut. A pair of shoes visible beneath it, muddy. Heavy boots pointed toward the toilet. I knocked. "Sir, this area's closed." Silence. Then, a low, croaking voice. "Occupied." I blinked. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged. "Sir, I'm gonna need you to leave." Occupied. Same word. But this time, it echoed. like it bounced off faraway stone walls. I kicked the stall door. It swung open. No one there, just boots, sitting by themselves. Upright dot, and on the back wall, written in something dark, encrusted, occupied since 1974. Suddenly, the other stall slammed shut behind me. I turned. No shoes visible, just shadows leaking out from the bottom. I backed out, heart pounding as I reached the hallway. The light died, and behind me, from both stalls at once, occupied, occupied, occupied. I ran, tried to quit the next day. They wouldn't let me. Said I signed a contract. Permanent staff. NaN-transferable. They showed me the paperwork. My signature was there. Dated October 31st, 1974. I wasn't born until 1995. Now I mop those stairs every night, and when I pass the downstairs restroom, I don't check the stalls anymore, because they're still occupied. My name is Daron Clove, and I worked as the projectionist at the Hallmark Theater, an ancient cinema built in 1926, full of dust, creaks, and more ghosts than guests. They brought me in because I still knew how to handle 35mm reels. No one wanted to touch the old projector in Theater 3. Not after what happened. I didn't believe the rumors, not until I screened that film. It arrived with no return address, no label, no markings, just a rusted metal canister, cold as a morgue drawer. Inside was a single reel, scratched and brittle, and a note. Play only once. Do not watch. Naturally, I thought it was some marketing stunt, an underground film trying to build hype. So I queued it up during our midnight showing slot, hoping for weird but artsy. I wish it had been artsy. The moment the film started, the projector screamed, not a mechanical hummus scream, like metal being tortured. On screen, a man, tied to a chair, in a small, windowless room, his mouth sewn shut. Behind him, shadows moved, even though there was no visible light source. I tried adjusting the focus, thinking it was a bad reel, but the man looked straight at me, not at the audience, at the projection booth. The screen went black. Then, a new shot. My projection room, perfectly mirrored. Same coffee cup, same scratched desk, same flickering red bulb, except ... There was someone in it, someone standing where I was sitting. I turned. No. One. I looked back. The figure was closer now. Closer every second. I flipped the projector switch off. Nothing happened. Pulled the plug still running. Slammed the power breaker's darkness finally. But the screen glowed one last time. It showed me on the floor. Eyes burned out. Mouth wide open in a silent scream. I ran out and locked the booth. Later, when I returned with a flashlight and backup, the reel was gone. So was the film in the system, but the booth mirror had something new scratched into it. Watched too long. I don't work there anymore, but every once in a while, I wake up in the middle of the night, ties burning, mouth sewn shut in my dreams, and I swear I hear the old projector turning. ... In a room I can't escape. My name is Alia Trent, and I used to run midnight horror marathons at a tiny indie cinema called the Hollow Reel. It was one of those places that smelled like stale butter and nostalgia. We had a cult following, people who thrived on jump scares and grainy slashers. But what happened during our Lost Films night wasn't a gimmick. It was something else. Something that shouldn't have been seen. That night, we were showing a recovered reel from a 1973 movie called The Portrait Room. Never released, never finished, rumored cursed total urban legend stuff. Of course, that made it perfect for the lineup. We had maybe 12 people in the audience, regulars, hardcore horror fans, the kind who laugh when someone gets decapitated. The moment the film started, I knew something was off. There was no title card, no sound, just a grainy shot of an empty room, a chair, a mirror, and a single, flickering light bulb, and then the mirror moved. Not the camera, just the reflection. I thought it was clever editing, until someone in the audience screamed. I looked down from the booth, and a guy in the third row was standing, pointing at the screen. He was yelling something, but no sound came out. I turned up the booth mic. Still nothing. Like the audio itself had been erased from the theater. The others were frozen in their seats. Not like scared, stiff-like, literally frozen. No blinking, no twitching. Like wax statues mid-breath. I ran down, waving my flashlight. They didn't even flinch. The screen now showed a close-up of the chair. A woman was sitting in it, head tilted sideways. Her eyes were sewn shut. She began to move, slowly lifting her chin toward the camera. As she did, every bulb in the room shattered at once. My flashlight died. Emergency lights. Nothing but the film ... kept playing. I swear on my life I saw something crawl out of the projector light, like it stepped between the film and the screen. A figure made of flickering shadows and static. It dragged itself down the aisle, glitching like a broken GIF. I backed away, heart in my throat. It passed each frozen viewer, leaning in, whispering something to them. Then it turned to me, no face. Just the hiss of burned film stock, and a mouth, like a ripped reel. It said one word: projector. I ran back to the booth, and shut everything down, hit every kill switch, pulled the reel mid-spin, and threw it in a fireproof case. The second I did, the lights came back. People blinked, gasped, looked around like they'd just woken up from a dream. Only the man from the third row was missing, his seat still warm. We reviewed the CCTV later. He never arrived. No footage of him walking in, no ticket record, but his coat was found draped over seat C4, folded neatly. No one's dared show the portrait room again. It's locked away. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear the hum of a projector spinning. ... and my shadow glitches just a little too late. My name is Kellen Voss, and I took my girlfriend June to Silver Haze Cinemas on a quiet Thursday night. It was her idea to catch some obscure indie drama that had zero trailers but glowing reviews. I'm more of a slasher guy, but hey, relationships are about compromise, right? The movie was called In Silence We Rest. Never heard of it. No poster. Just a white marquee with that title, glowing faintly like a tombstone. There were maybe 6 other people in the room, scattered, quiet. The movie started with no logos, no music, just black screen, and a single, slow whisper. Stay still. I turned to June, smirking, thinking this was some artsy build-up, but she was staring straight ahead, her hands clenched tight on the armrest. I whispered, "You okay?" She didn't respond, didn't even blink. Then the movie shifted. Still no sound. Just static slowly forming an image of theater, just like ours, with people sitting in the exact same seats we were. I looked around, the guy 3 rows ahead of us. On screen, the couple in the back, also on screen. US. Right there in the middle. Motionless. Except in the movie, one by one, each person began to vanish. No scream, no fade, just blink, gone. I stood up. That's when the whisper came again, this time from behind me. "Sit down." I froze, turned slowly. No one there, but the screen changed. Now it showed me standing, looking behind me, in real time, only. In the movie version, something was right behind me. Long limbs, pale skin, a face made of hands. June finally moved. She gasped, tried to stand, but her legs buckled. It was like the seat itself held her in place, and one by one, the other people in the theater started to vanish for real. This time, a blink, a twitch dash, gone, no noise. Just the flicker of the screen, matching each disappearance like a script, playing out live. We sprinted for the exit, but when we got to the door, there was no lobby, no light, just a blank wall of gray, like the set of a play left unfinished. I turned back, and the theater was empty. No June, no seats, no screen. Just me, and silence. Then the screen flickered back on. It showed one seat occupied, me, watching myself. The whisper returned, now from every direction. In silence, we rest. My name is Callan Drove, and I've worked as a projectionist for over 12 years. I've always liked being behind the scenes, up in the booth, where the reel hums louder than the crowd. The theater I worked at, Luna Grand, had been around since the 1940s. Dusty red velvet curtains, a ghostly echo in the halls, and chairs that creaked like they remembered better days. It was a Wednesday night, dead, as usual. One customer bought a ticket for the 9:45 p.m. showing of a black and white classic. One ticket. I remember because when I tore the stub, he didn't say a word. He just nodded, walked in, and disappeared into the darkness of screen 3. From my booth, I could see every seat on the security monitor. The guy sat dead center row H, seat 7. No popcorn, no drink, no movement. About 20 minutes into the film, I saw a flicker on the screen, not from the projector, but from the feed. A shadow shifted 2 rows behind him. I rewound the footage. Nothing. Played it again. Still nothing. Then I looked again at the monitor. He was gone. Not the shadow. The man. I blinked. Rewound again. Still in his seat, but live feed. Empty chair. I checked the hallway. No one left. The auditorium door never opened. It couldn't have. I'd have seen it on the outer cam. I decided to go down. The theater was colder than usual, and when I pushed the door to screen 3, the movie froze. Not skipped, froze. Like someone pressed pause on the world. The screen showed a single frame now. The man, sitting in his seat, staring directly at me. But the seat in real life was empty. I turned back to the lobby, heart pounding, like a drum solo. Then I heard it. Creak, creak, creak. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Walking across the aisles of screen 3, I spun around. Nothing. Then the lights flickered. All the screens in the building turned on at once, each showing a different angle of the same seat. Row H, seat 7. All empty. But on each screen, a new figure began to appear, translucent at first, then more solid. All of them with blank eyes and wide, permanent smiles. And they all looked like the man. A voice whispered from the speakers. Not over the PA, but from inside the walls. This seat is never empty. It only waits. I ran. Locked the projection room, shut off the system, called my boss the next morning, and quit, without picking up my last check. That was a year ago. I heard the theater reopened under a new name, Novalight Cinemas. A trendy rebrand, same old haunt. I read in the paper last week that a customer went missing after the 9:45 show. No one saw him leave. His car is still in the lot. The staff says they reviewed the footage. Last frame, row H, seat 7, empty, until he turns his head toward the camera and smiles.